Good morning and welcome to today's Summer Leadership Institute. Today I will be presenting my leadership capstone project, which is Employee Development and Coaching at the State of Wisconsin Unemployment Office. The purpose of my study was to investigate the employee development and coaching practices at the State of Wisconsin Unemployment Office. The state has focused their training by combining elements from the past, such as classroom training, along with present trends in training, such as web-based training and mentorships. Current training techniques include nesting, which is defined as the tendency to arrange one's immediate surroundings, such as a workstation, to create a place where one feels secure, comfortable, or in control. Relating to employee development, this occurs when training groups are formed with the hope that the employees can learn not only with each other, but from each other. Classroom training is a school-like atmosphere where the staff development coordinator teaches the adjudicators the procedures to properly process the issues of an unemployment claim. WebEx training is essentially classroom training by video from the main office in Madison. The use of technology has made this possible without the need to travel to Madison. However, the presentation is more like a conference call with a video component. When the Eau Claire adjudicators have questions, they type their questions from their computer, which results in some disruption of the flow of the training, or some questions could possibly get missed. Pre-review and post-review is the first interaction with the adjudicator and the mentor. The pre-review consists of the mentor reviewing the case before the decision is entered. The mentor will make recommendations of additional questions to ask, either the claimant or the employer, and often the adjudicator will need to adjust some part of their case, either the documentation, the rationale, or the packaging of the case. Post-review consists of the mentor reviewing the case after the decision is entered. The mentor will review the case to ensure that all aspects were investigated, the law was applied properly, and the case was free of any errors. Finally, mentorships. A mentor is defined as someone who teaches or gives help and advice to a less experienced person. At the State of Wisconsin Unemployment Office, an adjudicator is assigned to a mentor immediately after the group training. Regarding employee development and coaching, it appears that there is a wide range of interpretation on what is effective. Sahandias and Boris examined the relationship between employee training effectiveness and job satisfaction, motivation, and commitment. They determined that to bridge the gap between the desired and actual performance of the individual, training needs to be more focused on changing the skills and attitudes. Two studies contrasted manager as coach, executive coaching, and formal mentoring. Zhu, Sheshko, and McLean found the practices for employee development have been increasing in the last decade, and that development is important for all employees, not just management. Ellinger, Hamlin, and Beatty determined that formal mentoring occurs more in a structured environment, unlike informal mentoring, which develops naturally and voluntarily. There are conflicting studies determining the effectiveness of mentoring. Baranek, Rowling, and Eby conducted a study investigating one reason that mentoring works, namely that the receipt of mentoring support sets in motion a social exchange process whereby perceptions of organizational support are generated, which in turn predict positive protege work attitudes. However, there was some critics on mentoring relationship. No warns that assigned mentoring relationships may not be as beneficial due to personality conflicts, perception that the mentor's ability to influence is eroded, and it lacks true personal commitment by either the employee or the mentor because it wasn't formed by their choice. The state is in the process of continually hiring adjudicators, some to replace those who have retired, others to replace the ones that didn't make it through the probationary period, almost 25%. One aspect to review would be the mentor relationships and the theory of servant leadership. The mentors may need to adjust the way they are mentoring. They also need to be aware of how they're training their adjudicators. And lastly, if the mentor is unavailable, the adjudicator is often directed to a different mentor, which runs the risk of inconsistency. The framework of this study was to examine the mentorships and how they relate to employee development and coaching practices. It is important to understand the training the adjudicator receives prior to being assigned to a mentor, the nesting, classroom training, and the WebEx training. It is also important to realize the organizational climate, which is the mentor availability, the BTQs, which are the quarterly reviews of the cases that each adjudicator goes through, what their support system is, and if they're receiving any ongoing training. Other factors that affect the success are the production quota, the claimant employer appeals, how much investigative experience they had prior to being hired, how well their time management is, and the complexity of the case they're dealing with. Lewin's theory of change could help adjust the mentorships to a more servant leadership type. The theory of change would be to unfreeze, make the changes, and then refreeze the process. The research design of the study was a survey for the adjudicators that had been hired over the past 2 years. This allowed for a sampling of how the training is perceived and accepted by the current staff. Questions were asked regarding servant leadership and if they were part of this type of relationship. It also covered how effective they felt the nesting, classroom training, WebEx training, pre-review, post-review were also. The theory of servant leadership would focus more on the needs of the adjudicator. It in turn would place more responsibility back on the mentor. The mentor would be the one to increase the communication. The mentors may need to learn different teaching techniques. Not everyone learns the same or in the same way. It also will allow the mentor to grow personally and professionally. Servant leadership can best be defined as turning things upside down. Instead of employees serving their boss, leaders serve their people. All servant leaders share 2 fundamental beliefs. 1, every person has value and deserves civility, trust, and respect. And 2, people can accomplish much when inspired by a purpose beyond themselves. The 5 practices of servant leaders include the following. 1, clarify and reinforce the need for service to others. 2, listen intently and observe closely. 3, act as selfless mentors. 4, demonstrate persistence. And 5, lovingly hold themselves and others accountable for their commitments. A total of 13 participants were initially recruited to participate in the survey, and the final sample consisted of 12 adjudicators working at the State of Wisconsin Unemployment Insurance Eau Claire Benefits Center. This represents a 92% response rate. Of the participants, 1 has been employed for 1 year 7 months, 2 have been employed for 1 year 5 months, and 9 have been employed for 11 months. Overall, 67% have previous investigative experience. Some of the sample questions in the survey included how often they interact with their peers from their nesting group, if they were comfortable enough in the classroom training to ask questions, and if they felt that the pace was adequate. If they felt any confusion with the WebEx training as compared to the classroom training, how often they were approached by their mentor on pre-review and in post-review, and lastly, if they were comfortable with their mentor, if they ever had a different mentor, and if they ever experienced any inconsistencies between the mentors. As with any research project, the validity of the data is the most important aspect. The questionnaires were placed in sealed envelopes, which protected the privacy of the adjudicator and kept the research confidential. Adjudicators were instructed to skip the questions in which they did not feel comfortable answering. All responses were kept anonymous, and most adjudicators offered additional insight when turning in the questionnaire to me. They felt comfortable providing feedback on what they felt helped them learn and how to perform their job. The questionnaires were either returned to me or I stopped by the adjudicator's cubicle and picked them up. I sealed the envelope in front of them and placed it. No names were marked on anything to keep confidentiality. In analyzing the data, for the yes-no answers, Excel was used to determine percentages and create graphs and charts. The open-ended questions were compared for similarities and determined what was most relevant to the training process. One of the major variables that affected the nesting process was the size of the group. Overall, the nesting groups showed 58% interacting daily, 33% interacting with others in the office, and 9% felt isolated. Nesting does have its advantages. 91% felt they learned something from their peers. 100% felt they taught something to their peers or showed them how to do something. 91% have openly discussed aspects of their cases with their peers. And 91% have also discussed mentor inconsistencies with their peers. Overall, many felt that the nesting aspect was one of the most positive things of the training process. In the classroom training, 50% thought the pace was too fast, 31% felt that it was adequate, where only 19% felt that it was too slow. One of the variables was the type of material being taught. For the most part, 91% felt that the expectations were clearly outlined on what they should be learning. All felt that they were learning in a comfortable atmosphere where they could ask clarifying questions. WebEx training, on the other hand, left most adjudicators with a sense of unease. Over half, 58%, felt that they couldn't ask clarification questions without interrupting the flow of the training. This left 75% feeling more confused on the issues they were learning versus what they learned in the classroom. When asked if WebEx training was as effective as the classroom training, 92% answered no. During the time the adjudicators were in pre-review, only 41% were approached by their mentor to see if they needed assistance with any of their cases. However, of the 50% that were not approached, 33% would ask for help when needed. Another variable that comes into play is the availability of their mentor. When asked if they always had the same mentor for their pre-reviews, 58% stated yes, where 42% stated no. During post-review, only 33% were approached to see if they needed assistance. Mentor availability also comes into play in post-review. When asked if they always had the same mentor for their case reviews, 75% stated yes, where 16% stated no, and 8% preferred not to answer. The part where this is most important is the BTQs, the quarterly reviews of the adjudicators, are not always done by their mentor. They're often dispersed through the office and looked at by different mentors. This is where mentor consistency becomes important, because if one mentor tells you how to do it one way and a different mentor reviews the case, they may downgrade that case for aspects that they feel are missing, or that it was done differently than they would have. When it comes to feeling comfortable asking questions of the mentor, 92% responded yes, and 8% responded sometimes. With this level of comfort, it comes as no surprise that there wasn't a single adjudicator that would request a change in their mentor. Adjudicators were approached by their mentor 83% of the time. The frequency of the content was mixed, with 16.5% stated daily, 25% stated weekly, 42% stated monthly, and 16% did not respond. The assigned mentor was not always available for 92% of the adjudicators. There was always a backup for them to go to. However, 83% experienced inconsistencies between the different mentors in the information that they were given. When asked if they had ever given feedback to the mentor about their training experiences, 75% responded that they had not, while 17% stated that they had, and 8% were unsure if they had. 83% of the adjudicators felt that their mentor understood the best way for them to learn, while 17% did not. It is the determination of this study that the adjudicators could benefit from mentors who follow the practice of servant leadership. The adjudicators currently initiate most of the interaction, and the theory of servant leadership would change that dramatically. It would open the lines of communication so that it may reduce the inconsistencies that are prevalent. 5 recommendations that I would make would be to create an outline for cases with sample questions that should be asked in the investigation, with sample rationales also available. Additionally, a checklist could be designed to aid processing a case. Secondly, a case breakdown would give the adjudicator a better understanding on where the issue arose. An example of this would be if the claimant reports the separation as a layoff, but later documentation from the employer reveals that the claimant quit the job. Role-playing and training could show the adjudicators how to actually process the case. If the mentor set up an exercise, it would showcase more on what is expected from the adjudicator. The mentors could show how some claimants can be more difficult and how to reword similar questions to get the answer that is needed from the claimant. Assessing the mentor's training style could give the adjudicators the opportunity to understand how some mentors train. The adjudicator could rank their training preference so that they are aligned with a mentor that utilizes the type of training that they learned the best from. Lastly, in the matter of consistency, have all mentors pre-review one of the adjudicator's cases. This will allow the adjudicator to receive as much feedback as possible. This would also be extremely helpful when the adjudicator's performance is reviewed by a mentor different from their own. It would show the mentors where some differences are. I would now like to open the floor for any questions that you may have regarding my capstone project.